Year after year, your performance review just comes around, you get great feedback, and you hear some version of like, you're such a valuable team member. And then you bring up your career goals. You ask about your growth. You ask about that promotion. You ask what's next for you. And suddenly the tone just changes. You need more presence. You need to be more strategic. You need to be seen at the next level. And that can feel so frustrating when, from your point of view, everything you've been doing already counts as strategic. You've been delivering, you've been carrying a lot, you've been trusted, you've been solving problems. So you walk away thinking, what exactly have I been building towards? And I don't want you to go through another cycle like this, because if mid-year reviews are here for you, this is the time to start positioning yourself for growth. And it's not at year end, when minds are already made up and calibration conversations are already happening. And people have often already formed a view of who is going to be ready for more. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through a simple framework to reposition how you talk about your goals at mid-year and how to turn that into a real development conversation instead of just another check-in. So a lot of people treat mid-years like it's just a transaction. It feels like a check-in. It's a progress update. It's a quick conversation about what's going fine and what needs attention. They talk about what they've been working on, what's on track, what's off track, and what they plan to finish. And that is fine if you just want like a routine review. But if you care about growth and your visibility and how you're being positioned for year-end recognition, mid-year actually matters way more than people think. This is where you have the opportunity to shape the narrative before it hardens. It is where you can help your manager connect your work to the business impact. And this is where you can start making it easier for other people to see you're not just a reliable person. And for quiet professionals, this really matters because if you're not actively shaping the conversation, it's really easy for your hard work to be visible, but your leadership potential to stay invisible. So this is the framework I want you to use when you are talking about your work. It's really around these three things: what you did, why it matters, and what it shows. And this structure is really helpful because it helps you to move out of that task reporting into actual positioning for yourself. A lot of people stop at the first part. They say what they worked on and they list all the initiatives, they describe the project, they explain the deliverable that they've done. And that is necessary, obviously, for a mid-year check-in, but it's not enough. So you also need to name why it matters. So up first, this is what I want you to think about in your mid-year review. So are you working on things that the organization sees as strategic? That doesn't mean that every single project has to be like this big wow. It means that you need to understand how your work connects to the priorities that really matters beyond your to-do list and that really matters for the company. And because one of the biggest mistakes that people make in performance conversations is that they talk about the effort, the capacity that you've taken on, and that you're really reliable at delivering everything, while their manager is more thinking about like the impact, the visibility, the strategy. And so before you go into that meeting, I just want you to zoom out. So what are the priorities for your team right now? What is the business trying to improve, solve, reduce, protect, or accelerate? Where does your work actually connect to these outcomes? And what are you doing that is helping the organization move something important forward? So if you're doing strategic work, you need to name it and put a label to it. And don't assume that the connection is so obvious for your leader, because this is really important for a quite high performer. Many of us were taught that good work should just speak for itself. And they think, if I do really good work, people will just naturally notice and just understand the significance. And sometimes they do, but a lot of the times, let's be frank, they don't. What they see is execution. What they miss is your judgment and your strategic thinking underneath all of it. So going into mid-year, your job is not just to report what you did. your job is to frame it in a way that is going to help your leader understand how you think. And once you know the work is worth highlighting, the next question becomes, how do you actually talk about it without, sounding boastful, which I know is cringy for a lot of quieter high performers. So here are some questions for you to think through so that you can think about the impact of your work and articulate it. So what changed because of your work? What risk did it reduce? What clarity did it create? What decisions did it help move forward? And what business priority did it support? And now with that in mind, then the third piece is what it actually shows. So this is where you help your manager connect your work to your growth. So with the impact that was created, think through, what does this demonstrate about the way that you operate? How does it show strategic thinking, cross-functional influence, your ownership, your judgment? And what does it mean when it comes to your readiness for a broader scope? And this third part is where a lot of quiet professionals will hesitate because they worry that it's going to sound like it's just self-promotion. And it doesn't have to be, because if you're naming observable evidence that's going to help your manager interpret your work accurately, it's not being arrogant. This is just really communicating your leadership. So here's a really simple example. So instead of just saying, I led this project and I got it done on time, you could say, I led this project across multiple stakeholders and kept it moving when priorities were shifting. What mattered about that was that it helped us stay aligned on a key team priority and avoid delays. I also think it shows that I'm able to manage complexity, influence across functions, and keep people moving toward an outcome. So you could see it's the same work, but with just a different level of positioning. So you're not exaggerating anything. You're not putting on this grand performance for your leader. You're just helping your manager see the leadership goals and signals that is inside the work. And that is what you want to practice before your mid-year. And if this is exactly where you get stuck, if you know you're doing strong work, but you're struggling to talk about it in a way that actually positions you for growth, this is the kind of work that I support quiet high performers inside my group coaching program, the Scene Leadership Experience. If you want support becoming more visible, speaking about your value with more clarity, and being positioned for advancement in a way that still feels authentic, you can book a free 30-minute call with me below to see if the program is the right fit for you. But stay with me because this next part is really important, because once you frame the work, you need to turn that into a development conversation. And because if you only talk about your performance alone and never talk about where you're going and where you want to go, that's going to leave too much for interpretation, especially if you've been known and recognized as someone who is reliable. That could be misinterpreted as someone who is comfortable in their role. So this is what I want you to stop avoiding, because I want you to start connecting the dots in terms of your performance and the aspirations that you are working towards. And this is how you bring it in. So you say something like, based on the work that I've been doing and the way that I want to continue to grow, I'd love to talk about what this starts to position me for. Or you could say something like, as I think about my next step, I want to make sure I'm aligning my work not just with current expectations, but with what readiness looks like for more scope. Or I'd really value your perspective on what these strengths signal and what I would need to continue building to be seen as ready for the next level. And as you could tell, this is a really different conversation than like, so when am I going to be promoted? And you're not forcing a yes or no decision in the moment. You're asking for alignment from your performance to their perception, and you're making your growth visible. So you're inviting your manager to tell you what they see and what they actually think that you need to work on. And now that you've set the stage, you can ask, what skills does the next level require? What do you need to see to show that I'm ready? Where do you already see that in me? Where do I need to keep stretching? What experiences would help position me more clearly for that? And this is how you turn a performance review into a positioning conversation. And if there is no time for that, don't let that moment just fly by. Ask for more time. So you can say something like, I'd really like to continue this conversation because growth is important to me. Could we set up another 30 minutes in the next couple of weeks to focus just on development and what readiness looks like for the next level? And then you book the time. Don't wait for your manager to do this. And that initiative is going to show your ownership and your desire to grow. It shows your intention and it keeps the conversation moving instead of letting it disappear for another 6 months or 1 year. I actually heard from a client that it's been more than a year since they talked about their aspirations and development. So once you've had this conversation, don't just leave it there. Make sure that you set up that next meeting. And you can just say something like, thanks, that was really helpful. I'm going to work on what we discussed, and I'd love to schedule a follow-up next quarter so that we can keep checking in on how I'm progressing. And you'd be surprised by how many people leaders are more than willing to have this conversation with you on a quarterly basis. But making sure that it is in your calendar is going to now support your growth. It's not going to be the surprise annual topic, and it's going to be an ongoing conversation. And that's what's going to help people get positioned differently by year end. So if you want your year end conversation to actually get you the recognition that you deserve, the growth that you want, or perhaps that promotion, I want you to stop thinking about your mid-year as just like a quick check-in. Mid-year is really where you start shaping that story. And it is where you align your work to the business outcomes. And this is why I want you to frame your contributions around what you did, why it matters, and what it shows. And that's how you move the conversation from just a check-in into a development conversation. And this is how quiet professionals are going to start getting positioned more clearly, not by waiting until your year end. And it is really about starting now. And if you know you want help with that and be positioned for growth that is going to feel like you, book a free 30-minute call with me below and see if the scene leadership experience is the right fit for you. Because by year end, a lot of the story is already written, and I want you to shape that story before it is too late. I'll see you in the next video.